taking that conversation further, Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary MEA, is with me on the show. Michael Kugelman, South Asia Senior Associate at the Wilson Center, is with us today. I'm also speaking with Rabinder Sachdev, Foreign Affairs expert. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us on the conversation. Ambassador Chakravarti, let's talk about why the state visit comes at such an important juncture for the India and the U.S. partnership.
Well, it's all about the geopolitical changes that are taking place in the world today. And this would not have happened if the United States had not helped China's rise, which was part of the Washington Consensus at that time, way back in 1971 and thereafter. So I think it's normal. Politics change, geopolitical changes take place, geoeconomics changes, and these are some of the factors that have led to a closer kind of embrace between India and the USA. Look, it's ultimately about convergence of interest, and there's a lot of talk about values and things like that, but I don't think values are there, but I don't think those are the compelling sort of factors that have brought USA and India together. It's basically geopolitics and geoeconomics. India's growth has been impressive in terms of economic growth, and India needs the USA and the USA needs India. So for various reasons, and China is a factor. I would say China is the key factor in terms of bringing India and the US together.
So, Michael Kugelman, do you agree with that? A lot of this story is about, I'm going to add to China, two nations that are in the picture but not quite there. One is China and the other is Russia. And that's sort of setting the broad outlines of this growing proximity?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we know that the China factor has really driven U.S.-India partnership in recent years. And Russia, of course, is a bit of a different matter, though I would argue that it's testament to the strength of U.S.-India partnership that even though the U.S. and India do not see eye to eye on Russia, particularly vis-a-vis Russia-Ukraine, that has not impacted U.S.-India relations. And I think that the Biden administration may not agree with India's position, but it's accepted it. And so you don't see, and you're not going to see during the state visit, attempts by the administration to try to pressure Modi or other Indian officials to take a stronger stand against the invasion. I think that both sides have agreed that they actually have a lot of things that they could talk about in a positive way, in the sense that the Indian government has made it very clear that it wants this war to end. It's not an era of war, as Prime Minister Modi has said. And I think that the U.S. government appreciates that position that that Prime Minister Modi has taken. They could also talk a lot about things like cooperating somehow to ensure the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. So I don't think that the Russia factor is as much of a problem for the U.S.-India relationship as one might have thought some months back. The U.S. and India have found ways to get around that challenge. And I think it's also testament to India's own foreign policy successes as a country embodying strategic autonomy, that more than a year after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, India's relations with both Washington and Moscow are quite good, though I would argue that the trajectory of India-U.S. relations is a bit more positive and stable and predictable than that of India-Russia relations. But still, all in all, I think that the Russia factor is not going to pose the challenge to the relationship that some might have thought it would right after the Russian invasion of Ukraine began.
So then that timing is important, isn't it, Michael? Because there's been time to cool off on Russia, Ukraine, and the positions taken there. India has made its stance very clear. What about vis-a-vis China? Do you see an increase in that cooperation in an even more meaningful manner?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you look at how the scope of cooperation vis-a-vis China has changed. You're now starting to see, obviously, cooperation between the U.S. and India vis-a-vis China in the Pacific region through their membership in the Quad, which of course the Indo-Pacific Quad, which is has become a very impactful regional organization. But you're also starting to see more discussion and the formation of dialogues around U.S.-India cooperation vis-a-vis the Indian Ocean region, because of course, Washington recognizes the growing Chinese naval presence in the Western Indian Ocean region. So I think that you're starting to see recognition on both the part of the U.S. and India that the entire Indo-Pacific region, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, that this has become a major theater for China and spaces where it has sought to push out its power and stage provocations, and that for that reason, this is a broader area where the U.S. and India need to cooperate. So yeah, I think there has been significant amounts of progress. And certainly if you go back to the terrible border clash in 2020, where of course you had 20 Indian soldiers that died in that clash, that I think really amplified the threat posed by China, not just in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, but also the scale and the scope of that threat along the line of actual control. And that has really, I think, sharpened the realization for the U.S. and India that there's a lot that they could talk about in terms of working together to counter China in broader geographic spaces.
Okay, let me come to Rabinder Sachdev for his perspective on, Rabinder, on two specific points. One is that why is a state visit being looked at specifically as a milestone? What does that signify in terms of the depth of the relationship between two countries when it comes to the United States? And the second address to a joint session of the Congress. Why are these two things so important?
Thank you. I think it indicates two things. One, we know that India needs America for its investments for technology transfer and multiple other things. What it means to me fundamentally is that now America is feeling a certain pain due to which America wants to deepen the partnership with India. Let me give you in 30 seconds. In the next 10 years, China is a conflict waiting to happen. Maybe Taiwan wants weapons from America. NATO wants weapons from America. Ukraine needs weapons and munitions from America. America's own inventory of its weapons and munitions has gone down dangerously. America is now thinking and looking around at India as a partner to be its defense industrial production base, with which, remember in World War I, World War II, the ordnance factories in India were supplying bombs and munitions. America needs something like that now. America is at a major pain point. All their wargaming scenarios over the next 10 years are showing that in case of a Taiwan conflict, China would suffer immensely, America would suffer immensely also, and there will be a shortage of ammunitions. I think that's the biggest reason that America is moving with alacrity. Why is the TOT happening, which had never happened? Sure, keep aside the fact of the market, that India is a market, yeah. Keep aside the factor that US wants to draw India away from Russia, as everyone said. That's no big deal. India will keep buying the oil, but over time, I think our weapon purchases from Russia will go down due to multiple factors, right? America needs India as a counterweight to China. Yeah, sure. America needs India as a market. Sure, that America always needed. But now, why is America acting now, as I think Ambassador said, what are the compelling issues? To my mind, the compelling issue for America today is a defense industrial production base. That's one. Now, stepping back, what it means for India now, see, after COVID and after Ukraine, this is the era of a new world order emerging. Right now, countries are, if not placing their bets, but probing their, situations. That's where we are. That's where America is. And it is at that level that US and India would have a strong cooperation. Remember, as again, I think one of our esteemed panelists said, I don't think,
right.
Of course, we also talk about common values of democracy, biggest, largest. Sri Thanedar was talking right now. In fact, he's a good friend and we worked on his campaign also with my group, right? Anyway, but it's not about values. It's about interests. We have interests, they have interests, our interests are common interests. And one last thing I leave on a very note, in the next 5 to 10 years, whatever happens between US and China and Taiwan and all, US has a culture and a style of making deals. The US can make a deal with China and say, okay, guys, let's carve out our worlds. You be there, we be there. Let's do our business and go ahead. What happens to India? Let's think about it. It's not always that, and even now, America, Blinken is there right now in China. They're talking about a deal. It's not that China and US will be enemies forever, or maybe they will be enemies. Maybe they will go and fight. They will turn the world into they will totally flame out the world. But after that, again, they will sit down. We have to figure out our own ways and ahead. But yes, in that process, for the time being and for the long-term future, it is in our sovereign interest to go as deep as we can with the US without getting drawn into...
Well, that's exactly what we've been doing, right? It's a matter of strategic interest. And look at it this way. One way to look at it is exactly this. The fact that whether it was a Democratic president in Obama or a Republican in Trump, or once again a Democrat in Biden, and no matter what noise was coming out of the Congress, the relationship has only been growing deeper because of the recognition of a common interest. Ambassador Chakravarti, what is the interest as far as India is concerned? If I was to break this down into complete brass tacks, what do we want out of this relationship?
India's foreign policy is basically focused on making India a developed nation. I think, to put it simply, that is our foreign policy. And if it takes a convergence of interests with the USA, then undoubtedly USA is a very important trading partner, economic partner, and a growing military partner of India. And there are and the diaspora, which is doing great work in bringing the two countries together. So we have huge interests with the USA, and there is no doubt that these interests are dictating our foreign policy approaches. Technology, for example, is an important aspect. Defense technology is an important aspect. You are seeing a lot of initiatives that are being discussed about in these sectors. Well, I mean, there is no doubt that the Indo-Pacific, as it is now called, is going to be an arena of future competition and even conflict, and that's what we are preparing for. I think both the USA and India are preparing for that. I mean, of course, nobody wants a conflict. Obviously, conflict amongst major powers will devastate everybody in the region. So I think what is happening today is, as I said earlier, a convergence of interests, geopolitical interests and geoeconomic, which are bringing the two countries together. And this happens from time to time. The cycle of history goes on. And there was a time when, as I said, when America supported China to become an economic power. But that was the era of the Cold War. And once that was over, then America suddenly found China has become a competitor. And China wants to do it, remold the world in its own ideological way. I mean, the China model, as they call it, the development model. So I think you also see an ideological battle going on. And India obviously is not in either camp. We are not camp followers of anybody, and we never have been. So I think what is interesting is that despite our strategic autonomy, we are seeing a coming together of the USA and India in many ways. And that is the reason that we have to understand why that is happening. And that is convergence of interest, nothing else.
There's a soft power impact to it as well. And I know a yoga day in New York is perhaps nice pictures to go along. And I want to come to Michael Kugelman on this. Just the impact of India growing in the American consciousness. Is it actually happening, or is that how we see it sitting over here? When we see just as simple as more and more Indian origin characters in American movies and shows, or a lot of top tech CEOs coming in from India. Is that impact being felt in the United States as well, the growing hold of or the soft power of India in the American consciousness, or is this something we are seeing from our prism?
No, it's very accurate. That is indeed the case. I mean, the Indian American community, as you know, or the Indian American diaspora is, one of the largest diaspora communities in the United States, and it's one of the fastest growing as well. And indeed, the fact that you now have that community so represented in politics, state and local, as well as national politics, it's also present in popular culture in the United States, and the contributions that the diaspora has made more broadly through, restaurants and so on. That all has an impact, certainly, and especially if you go to very low levels and, American children in schools who, they have classmates and friends who are Indian American. Some of them may have been born here, others may not have been, but they learn about India through those encounters. So yeah, I think that the Indian diaspora has certainly been a strong accelerant of Indian soft power in the United States. And more broadly, of course, soft power, I would argue, has been a main catalyst for India's broader global prominence in recent years. It's not just about the size of its military, its economy. It's the softer elements of power play a big role in that as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think that you are very correct. Though, as you know, for sure, we're starting to see in more recent years, you do have some members of the Indian American community, some organizations within them that have been a bit more critical of India and India's government and its leadership than you've seen in previous years. That's a sign of the times. But on the whole, absolutely, I fully agree that the Indian American community has been a very strong catalyst for the acceleration and diffusion of Indian soft power within the United States.
Yep. Rabinder Sachdev, we've talked about what both sides want from each other, where the common interests lie. What are the challenges in taking things forward, the sticking points? For the longest time, there were conversations about green cards, but that has sort of receded to the backdrop. Transfer of technology in defense. What else would you list as issues that need to be ironed out between the two sides?
Okay, let's go back on this with respect to today. The basic issue in US-India relations has been trust. Up till the US-India nuclear deal. The US-India nuclear deal was about energy, I think all of us know, and opening India's market for American business. That's how we lobbied in the US that it's a good deal. But more than that, it was a deal which was known as Atoms for Peace and Trust. So that's one trust level wherein both our countries started trusting each other. Now, over a period of time, this one visit of Modi ji, I think, is another landmark in that sense to the next level of trust in terms of so far even, transfer of technology, the restrictions of the export control regime of the US for whatever reasons were holding some other things back. Now, with the compelling need of the US to set up a defense industrial production, co-production base with India, that TOT tap will open up. So that trust will also open up. Now, other issues, yeah, sure, there are issues with the, visa matter, essentially, that's one. There is, of course, the outstanding trade issue, the GSPs, the Generalized System Preferences, which during the Trump administration was taken away. But I think as all of us are understanding, those are, I would not say hiccups, but yes, hurdles, but not big picture hurdles, because the trajectory overall and cemented absolutely by the Indian diaspora, I would say, or feel. Partly I am biased because, we engage and closely, are active. So maybe I'm overblowing this perspective, but from everyone you'll be hearing on this discussion or anywhere this discussion is happening over the next few days, the mention that the Indian diaspora plays a key role between US-India relations, including soft power, which Mr. Kugelman is mentioning. Apart from that, within the US, working with lawmakers, now the Samosa caucus, Sri Thanedar is now, I think, the 5th congressman in the US Congress. There are about 130 Indian Americans out there in the Biden administration in various positions. Next year, over 300 Indian American school boards, mayor elections, Congress, etc., will contest some of them. So that's going deeper. But back to your point of the, irritants, I think the irritant, one big irritant is the big brother attitude. I'm being very blunt, honest about it, that my way or the highway. which US often comes across as. And second is the issue of trust. Trust is being made up, but my way or the highway, if not my way or the highway, but my way, please. Yes, I think the US will go with that because that's the way the US works. I mean, that's they analyze something, they think this is the best way for the world, for me, and then they tell you that this is the best way for you also forward. We may not agree to much of that or some of that, and we may give inputs, but the US may not agree. So those will be the irritants which will keep coming. But the broad trajectory has too many, too many aspects of cooperation and value creation and creativity together between the two countries.
It's making sense.
So
that
will
partnership is making sense right now. I want Michael Kugelman's take on the irritants bit that Robin Sachdev has talked about.
Well, absolutely. There's always going to be sticking points, and I think that you could look across the spectrum. I mean, there have been some tariff disputes that got worse during the Trump administration and have not been addressed yet. Those will probably be discussed to some degree, but I think that the point of the state visit will be to focus on the positives and not get too burrowed down in the sticking points. The Russia-Ukraine factor is a minor sticking point. As I had said before, it's not what it could have been earlier, but indeed the U.S. would still prefer that India take a stronger stand against the invasion. And then I think the Pakistan factor looms large. But I think getting to the point that was made earlier about this notion of the U.S. playing the role of big brother or bully, I think perhaps that would come into play most on the issue of values, because I know that the U.S. Criticism, though it's been relatively subdued politically, U.S. criticism about rights and democracy in India, that has not gone down well. And I don't believe that that'll be a big focus of the state visit. And I think if it is, the best way to couch those comments is to essentially acknowledge, well, look, both of our democracies, like many democracies, have some challenges, and that's why our partnership is all the more important, to try to work together to address those in our own way. But again, I really think that the relationship is better now than it has been in many, many years, maybe ever. So none of the sticking points, none of the tension points are so strong that they could impact further forward movements. I mean, the only thing that you have to look at, it's a more structural issue, is the fact that India, to retain its strategic autonomy, does not sign on to the alliance system as the U.S. would like it to. So that will require some thought and creativity in the years ahead. As the U.S.-India security partnership continues to move very quickly, how can they continue to build that security partnership outside of the alliance system? And I think it's a challenge. It's an interesting challenge. It's not a serious challenge, but it's certainly something that both sides will have to work through in the years ahead.
Yep. But for now, the focus is on the state visit and all the pomp and show it comes with. Definitely a milestone in the relationship. There's very little doubt of that. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the discussion. But we're keeping the focus on that visit by Prime Minister Modi to the United States and looking back at his previous visits, where he has dealt with now, during his tenure as Prime Minister, with not one or two, but three very different U.S. presidents. Take a look.
Hugs, handshakes, diplomacy, dosti. In a nutshell, this describes PM Modi's camaraderie with the current and former US presidents he has met. Over this period, he has developed a personal bond with US presidents, from Obama to Trump to Biden. Starting with President Barack Obama, or Barack, as PM Modi would address his dear friend and the then US president.
राष्ट्रपति और मेरे परम मित्र ओबामा का बहुत बहुत आभारी हूँ कि फिर एक बार हमें आज मिलने का अवसर मिला है। मैं कांग्रेस का भी बहुत आभारी हूँ कि मुझे कांग्रेस को संबोधित करने के लिए निमंत्रित किया गया है।
Deep bonds of friendship and family that exist between our two countries.
If the then President Barack Obama and PM Modi forged an unlikely friendship, his successor Donald Trump took the relations to greater heights. While the former US President Trump lauded the PM as a great leader and a loyal friend,
he started out by his father's side as a chihuahua, a tea seller. When he was a young man, he worked at a cafeteria in this city. Stand up.
the PM took the friendship to a new height with a victory lap at the Howdy Modi event.
We in India have connected well with President Trump. The words of candidate Trump, अब की बार ट्रम्प सरकार.
While the Democrats took to power in the US, a positive turnaround in the relations was rather swift. From questioning the abrogation of 370 to hugs and handshakes, PM Modi and Joe Biden have shared quite a friendship. In fact, the two leaders have met multiple times ever since Biden took to power, with the US President sharing a warm hug with PM Modi at the sidelines of the G7 summit in Japan.
आपने पदभार संभालने के बाद चाहे कोविड हो, क्लाइमेट हो या क्वाड हो, हर एक में एक बहुत ही यूनिक इनिशिएटिव लिया है और मैं समझता हूँ ये यूनिवर्सिटी ये जो आपका इनिशिएटिव है आने वाले दिनों में बहुत बड़ा प्रभाव पैदा करेगा.
The ties are at an all-time high, with PM Modi being invited to the coveted state visit by Joe Biden, which was only so far shared by the French and South Korean presidents. And with an aggressive China, the ties are only expected to grow closer.